Hi there. I just felt like spontaneously recording something after I was processing something that seemed worth sharing for the channel and for you guys. And that's to do with healing trauma on the spiritual awakening path and a bit of my own experience and a bit of what I feel like could be helpful for those of you on the path, and what was helpful for me during the past 8 years of my kundalini awakening, or since kundalini first woke up in me. So I'll just do a little bit of a free association evening talk, totally unprepared sharing. So, I mean, all of us on the path, all human beings, carry trauma. There's not a single human being out there in the world who doesn't carry one or the other form of trauma within themselves, whether that's emotional trauma or physical/emotional trauma, whatever it is, in your developmental years or later on, whatever it is, on the spiritual awakening path, when you have kundalini, sooner or later this divine force of Shakti will bring light to everything that's not healed within you. So any blockage, any old emotional unresolved issue, any trauma, the Shakti fire, the Divine Mother, will sooner or later find and wants to purify and transmute it. And so with trauma, it's very special, because I find it's very important how, when the kundalini, let's say, hits something within us, which has been maybe there under the surface or deeply hidden, whether it takes us by surprise or whether we actually know what we're dealing with. It's always very important that instead of dealing with the story around the trauma, we deal with the sensations and the emotions around the trauma. So let's say you're healing trauma related to one of your parents, and there is this sense of intense anger and rage or sadness that comes with that, the quality of the trauma that the kundalini met within you, is so vitally important that we work with the sensations, with the energy of that trauma, like on a somatic level, for example. Where do I meet this sensation in the body? What emotion is it? If it's anger, it's probably in the belly. Does it want to move somewhere? Do you need to express that emotion in one way or the other? I remember when my trauma was very much to the surface, I had to do some anger expressing exercises, which really helped to get the energy moving out of the system, because otherwise the emotions will later on get stuck in our bodies, which we don't want to, because the energy basically just wants one thing. It wants to flow smoothly and free in the body. It just, wants this unblocked flow. Therefore, we can't store unresolved emotions. We have to work with those. Or if it's intense grief or sadness, then of course we work with that, and then we just have this maybe tear purge. And of course, every trauma that we experience, whether there's so many different forms of trauma, whether that's a one-time event or prolonged trauma over decades or during our developmental years, or just this one-off experience. There's so many different forms of trauma. Every trauma has, of course, on this human level, has a story to it. Of course, there's memories attached to the trauma. There's thoughts, we have this, oh, okay, that's when it happens. This is the person that I associate with this trauma. This is the environment I associate with. That's the emotions, of course. Every trauma that's within ourselves has a story to it, of course. But what I find very important, and also for my own healing, was when I went through a period of time where the kundalini, the divine mother, the energy of the divine mother met this trauma, that I wouldn't get too lost in the story of the trauma. Because when we get lost in the story, we're not in our bodies, we're not working with the sensations or the emotions. We're actually in our minds, of course, where the story resides. And then the danger is when we're in the story, in the mind, with our trauma. And then what we do is we have thoughts like maybe victimhood thoughts, or why did this happen to me? How could this happen? Less like, blaming, shameful victim thoughts, or this heavy burdened stuff that the mind creates around the trauma, which is so typical for a trauma story in the mind. This little me that life was just spoiled because of what happened there, basically. And when we get lost in that during our healing, then we actually keep the trauma alive more in the system, because it works like a feedback loop. Then it's like the energy of the trauma is stirred up, and then you feed it like a feedback loop with the story in your mind. The story about me and my trauma feeds this energy. And that's actually, if we do that, we can't really heal from it, because we're keeping it alive with a story around it. So, of course, it's inevitable. We're gonna have thoughts about the trauma when the fire, the Shakti Kundalini fire meets it. But very important to stay conscious enough and present enough during those times to not feed this too much with our thoughts and a mental narrative. That's it. Mental narrative around the trauma. Rather than really working with, okay, where is this in my body? What kind of quality does it have? What emotions are associated with it? Do these emotions want expressing? Do they want to be moved in one way or the other? And then, of course, there's like many beautiful tools we can use. My trauma that I recently encountered or worked with had to do with the relationship with my biological mother, and for the sake of healing, I wrote a letter to my mom that's actually not being sent to her, but just a letter basically I'm writing to her for myself to get all the things on paper to do with this dysfunction. And then you can do like amazing rituals, like, okay, you read it 3 days in a row out loud, and on a third day you burn the letter in like a healing ceremony. That's an amazing, because then you get all the stuff around the story of the trauma, you get it on paper and you burn it. Yeah, that's important for everyone who deals with trauma or heals with trauma, but especially, of course, since this channel or these videos that I'm creating are especially talking or meant for an audience who's going through a spiritual awakening and kundalini awakening. How we deal with our trauma when it's being met by God is especially important. Yes, I hope that helped. I just felt like this spontaneous little video because it was just the space, and I thought, why not? If you have any questions or if you would like to work with me, you could leave me a comment or you could send me a message to my email address. And yeah, see you next time. Namaste.